My name is John Lobell. I teach architecture at Pratt Institute. I blog at johnlobell.com, and you can reach me at johnlobell@mac.com. This is an outline for a discussion of the case for technological optimism. I live in two worlds, somewhat reminiscent of C.P. Snow's Two Cultures: the humanities and the sciences. Pratt Institute is mostly a design school, but there's a lot of people involved in the humanities who are technologically quite pessimistic. And I'm involved with some interesting projects, including one called Timeship. You can find out about it on the web, which puts me in touch with leading scientists and technologists. It's a world that's extremely technologically optimistic. Now, in this discussion, I'm going to address technology and not the humanities, politics, government, or economics, which, in terms of the things we're talking about, I think may be the real problem. I want to begin with predictions of demise and their failures. Most notorious after Malthus is Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. It opens with, "The battle to feed all of humanity is over. In the 1970s and 80s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death." And of course, it didn't happen. What actually happened was death rates declined, lifespan increased, despite the fact that the population doubled. Half as much land is now needed for the same amount of food, and calorie intake has increased 24%, in part due to the Green Revolution. And yet Ehrlich continues to state to this day the most serious flaw of the bomb was that it was too optimistic. A book that I used extensively in my teaching, Limits to Growth, by Meadows and the Club of Rome. And what they did was they had computer models where they looked at the relationships between resources, food per capita, pollution, population, and looked at how these things interrelated with each other, and said that no matter what we did, by the early 2000s, there would be a total collapse. Population would crash, pollution would roar out of control, and no matter how we fiddled with this, it wouldn't work except if we made everything steady state and eliminated all growth and development. In the face of this, Julian Simon in 1980 bet Paul Ehrlich on the direction of the cost of a basket of commodities to be picked by Ehrlich. Would they go up or down? And Ehrlich was predicting they'd go through the roof. And after 10 years, the average cost, corrected for inflation, had gone down 19%. Limits to Growth predicted we would run out of aluminum, among many other things. 8% of the Earth's crust is aluminum. Where would it go? Well, we did leave a couple thousand pounds behind on the moon. Maybe that's the problem that they foresaw. These kinds of negative predictions continue to this day. Thomas Friedman's Hot, Flat, and Crowded, more recently Stephen Emont's 10 Billion. Now, I'm familiar with this kind of book because I wrote one. Mine was not pessimistic, but it did look at the issue of a more gentle living on the land. So I am aware of and sympathetic to these issues. What has actually happened? In the long history, affluence has increased radically since the emergence of specialization, trade, and what Matt Ridley, in his addressing of this, refers to as sex between ideas. You can look at many examples. One that he mentions, the work of William Nordhaus, very extensive analysis. How do you analyze whether things are getting better, whether things are getting cheaper, how hard we're working? One way is to say, how many hours do you have to work in order to get a certain product or result? So the ancient Babylonians had to work 1,000,000 times as long for an hour of light as we do. So that's a claim that things are getting better. More to the moment, we're in the midst of something that has been labeled the Great Stagnation. The argument of the proponents of this notion is that since the mid-70s, affluence in the U.S. has declined or at least stopped growing. The reason given is that we have harvested all the low-hanging fruit. We've done the easy stuff and it produced great results, but it's not there anymore. This is a very complicated issue. to really understand what has happened since the mid-70s. But the fact is there have been some gains. Talk about those a bit later. And I believe the real problems are in the humanities, economics, politics, and government, and not technological innovation. It's a perspective book by Max Levchin, Gary Kasparov, and Peter Thiel called The Blueprint, proposed that innovation has stalled and needs to be revived. It was scheduled for release in January 2012. It's been postponed. Levchin has withdrawn from the project because something has happened. So in a book called Abundance by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler, they look at we're on the verge and even in the midst of an explosion in abundance. Technologies are improving. Techno-philanthropists are attacking problems. The lives of the poorest have improved substantially. But I just want to look at one of the things they address. Independent innovators achieve startling advances. Peter Diamandis himself, not working with great wealth, is founder and chairman of the X Prize Foundation, putting out prizes that are encouraging incredible breakthroughs in spaceflight, tricorder, which is for medical diagnosis, oil cleanups, fuel efficiency. He's co-founder and chair of the Singularity University, co-founder of Planetary Resources. They have identified one asteroid with $1 trillion worth of platinum. That's just one of a lot. And they're going to go get it. The projects that they give their students at Singularity University, how do you positively affect 1 billion plus people in less than 9 years? That's a typical project assignment. So this is a rich new way of thinking. Examples of these entrepreneurs: Elon Musk, he's a member of what's called the PayPal Mafia. People who were involved with co-founding PayPal pocketed a lot of money at the time of its sale. Elon Musk observes our automobiles can't run on fossil fuels forever. He creates Tesla Motors. NASA has dropped the ball in space flight. He creates SpaceX. We've got to get serious about solar energy. He creates Solar City. Idea of high-speed rail that they're talking about just won't work. He's working on Hyperloop, vacuum tube high-speed transportation. Another of these figures is J. Craig Venter, beat the government in sequencing the human genome at 1/10 the cost and 1/5 the time. He observes that corn yields 16 gallons of ethanol per acre in one of the great evils of all time, that we actually take the food of the poorest people in the world and burn it in our cars. So Venter's working on algae that will yield 10,000 gallons per acre of ethanol. So a fraction of Nevada could fuel all of U.S. autos. Another one of these figures is Dean Kamen, a great inventor. He observes that a huge percent of the world does not have access to clean water. Dirty water is the major cause of disease in the world today. So he creates Slingshot. It's about the size of a dorm refrigerator, and one of them can produce 1,000 liters of medical grade, injectable, clean, pure water a day from any source, seawater, sewage, at 2 cents a liter. And Coca-Cola is in a trial run distributing these. Now, to address this, we have to totally change how we think from scarcity to abundance, and this begins with understanding exponential growth. In scarcity, if you take water out of the Colorado River, there's less for me. In abundance, the more people who use Wikipedia, the better, more accessible, more complete it gets. If the number of people using Wikipedia go from 10 million to 100 million, there isn't less for each of us. There's more for each of us. It's a totally different world requiring a totally different kind of thinking. Key to this is exponential growth, which is addressed in some detail in Ray Kurzweil, prominent futurist and entrepreneur. His book, The Singularity is Near. He addresses this issue of exponential growth, and we look at the chart on the right, and you can pick any example, you say, there's only 10,000 people using the internet. This is insignificant, but it's doubling. Okay, so next year it's 20,000. That's insignificant. Next year it's 40,000. That's still insignificant. Next year it's 80,000. Few more years and it's getting somewhere. So you put 1 grain of rice on the first square of a chessboard, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth. How many grains of rice are going to be on the whole chessboard by the time you're done? And the point of this kind of exercise is that we can't imagine, because we are set up for linear thinking. This is not linear, it's exponential. And the answer is, by the 64th square, you've got on your chessboard 1,000 times the annual global production of rice. We've all heard about this in terms of Moore's law. Stated most generally, the power of the computer doubles. It's now about once a year. More specifically, Moore was saying that the number of transistors at the same cost that you can get on a chip doubles every 18 months, 2 years, but sum total computer capabilities are now doubling about every year. When you chart this out, you can simply predict out 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and historically, since they've started doing this, it totally pans out. The point is that this applies not just to computer chips, but to information technologies generally, as, for example, healthcare becomes an information technology. Sequencing the human genome is an information technology. It gets into this curve. And so in 1984, U.S. Department of Energy project spent $3 billion to sequence the human genome. In 98, Craig Venter did it for $300 million. In 2007, James Watson's DNA was done at the cost of $1 million. 2011, Illumina was doing it for $5,000. Today, it can be done for about $1,000. You can set up the chart, and when will it be $100? When will it be $10? You can know. And in fact, if you're in the medical industry, you better know. People in the computer industry pay a lot of attention to this, because if their next generation computer is not on the curve, no one's going to buy it because their competitors will be. Only thing about this sequence in the human genome is the cost fell a lot faster than the curve said it was going to. So, Ray Kurzweil says, we won't experience 100 years of progress in the 21st century. It'll be more like 20,000 years at today's rate. So, we're moving from this world of scarcity to one of abundance. Let's look at this in information. Compare Wikipedia to the paper Encyclopedia Britannica. It radically increases in its content, its cost approaches zero, and it becomes available almost infinitely to the entire world's population. Books, movies, music can be free. You have to address intellectual property rights. But the idea that books were limited to those people who could afford to buy the physical book, to have the bookshelves, to have the space to put them, that's over. You can get hundreds of books on your Kindle. Scribd website, pirated, but has 600,000 books and other documents. Movies, music. Google has already scanned almost all the world's books, tied up in court about how they're going to become available, but that's not a technological issue. Search. Remember going to the library and using the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. That was how you research something. And then you'd find that there was in the 10-year-old issue of Atlantic magazine had an article about this, and then you go down to the basement of the library hoping that we had the bound Atlantic magazines for that year. Now with Google, you just go get it, and search is in its infancy. But what Google is doing is continually evolving and already has competition, for example, from Wolfram Alpha, which is computational, which takes the material and applies computation to it, as opposed to simply looking for web pages. Higher education. Okay, Stanford University has this incredibly beautiful physical campus that can accommodate 18,000 students. Student to faculty ratio 5:1. So there's a scarcity there. If you're not one of the 18,000 that you don't have access to what they have to offer. Well, one of their professors, Sebastian Thrun, offered a course on artificial intelligence. And the first time he offered it, he had 160,000 students in his online course. And now MOOCs, massive open online courses, are exploding. Udacity, edX, Coursera, and then Khan Academy, iTunes University. Now, these are just beginning. We have to understand how to use them, but we should not be quick to put them down because it turns out that done properly, the one-on-one attention, the feedback, the discussion groups can actually be superior or an online course than a in-class course. And of course, you want to use them only as appropriate. Access to leading thinkers. When I was a kid, I had this really great record album by Edward Teller. One side was The Size and Nature of the Universe. The other side was A Theory of Relativity. I listened to it again and again. That's all I had. Every one of the figures I am describing in this lecture, we can see dozens of their lectures on YouTube, just a click away. All of the TED Talks that we can't afford to go see live are all available online. And then in primary education, we want a wonderful teacher available for our students. But for those who don't have the opportunity for this wonderful teacher, Dr. Mitra in India puts a computer in a hole in the wall of his laboratory. And he now observes that in 9 months, a group of children left alone with a computer in any language will reach the same standard as an office secretary in the West. I don't know if I believe that, but the point is these kinds of things are there. And if you say, well, there's the number of really qualified, excellent teachers is a limited resource, is there another way to do it? Today, we like to say a child in Africa with a smartphone has access to more information than did the President of the United States 15 years ago, and 2/3 of all Africans have cell phones. Okay, but how do they get online? Google and Facebook are in a race to wirelessly get online the entire world for free, launching blimps all over Asia. Moore's Law continues. Here is ENIAC, one of the first modern true computers, 5,000 operations per second, and then below that is a Cray Titan, 20 petaflops. I don't even know what those numbers mean, but it's a lot faster. Cloud computing. Exactly how powerful can your tablet computer be? And the answer is infinitely. It can plug into the cloud and have access to everything that's on it and all the computational power that can be made available to it through servers. Things like sensors. So we'll have smoke detectors in our apartments, but you get these little red lights coming on your car, sensors in the brake linings. And then if we look at the penny in the lower right, these sensors can be quite small. Imagine them sprinkled through the walls of this room to tell us, is there mold? Is there rust in the structure? Are there structural cracks? Is there something the maintenance department should know? Is there moisture? Is there leaks? There'll be sensors in our ballpoint pens to tell us they're running low. Sensors in the milk jug to inform Fresh Direct to deliver more milk. The human-computer interface. Again, not to be frozen in these things. The first Macintosh was wonderful, bringing this graphical user interface to the rest of us. But that's not going to be there forever. Now we can use our cell phones, Google Glasses, and then perhaps brain implants that will directly tie us to our computers. Quantum computing that'll be billions of times faster and more powerful than today's computers. The channels through which information flows. So if we go back to the 1930s with a telephone at 60,000 bits per second, and then we come up to today to a laser fiber optic with 100 billion bits per second. And this is an old slide, so it says hypothetical laser. It comes from an old Scientific American. But on the left, we see that experimentally, we're now up to 1 trillion bits per second that can go through a laser system. It's as though we've gone from, in the 30s, the information coming into our house would be coming from a twisted pair on a telephone, AM radio, and a newspaper, and would be like a faucet dripping. And today, with our laser fiber optics, it's like the Grand Coulee Dam has burst and it's coming through our window in terms of a comparison of the amount of information. And it's all networked, organized, searchable to be available for us to use. Okay, this is happening with information. It's becoming abundant, it's becoming free. But what about material abundance? That world's changing too. We're beginning to see 3D printing. So on the top left is really a kind of sort of a toy 3D printer. It can make useful things. The feedstock is a little spool of wire. The printhead goes back and forth the way it would on your inkjet printer, but that puts down a layer of plastic that's a thousandth of an inch and goes back and forth 1,000 times. It's now up to an inch. But lower left, we can 3D print in metal. BMW has dozens of 3D printers making parts for their cars. We can 3D print an engine block. And on the upper right is a 3D printed rocket engine that can handle the stresses and pressures and heat of a rocket engine. New materials such as carbon fiber composites. And so additions to the Bronx Whitestone Bridge have been done in this. On the right is a plastic airplane. Below that are an automobile and a bicycle in carbon fibers. And lower left, bridge in a backpack. Lightweight, corrosion resistant. And then Neil Gershenfeld from MIT's Center for Bits and Atoms can take all this to Africa. You need a bicycle? We can print a bicycle. You don't have to make a bicycle factory and a bicycle supply material infrastructure. You can just print a part for a water pump or a bicycle or anything else you need. Now technology continues to develop where we start to be able to work with single atomic precision. Robots are advancing. Key thing that's happening here that's interesting about all this, let's start on the left. That's a robot we've all seen that can handle the spray nozzle for painting automobiles, for example. But now, on the lower right is a robot. Some of my colleagues have them walking around their studios. And among the things holding this up have been sensors. So the robot has to be able to see and process what it's seeing. Now, if we look in the middle on the bottom with a couple people making idiots of themselves, hopping up and down in front of their TV, we can barely see it, but below that TV, which is hooked up to Microsoft Xbox, is a Microsoft Xbox Connect. So it's a little device that has what recently been a $10,000 scanner to see and process the information in its front of it, like these people hopping up and down. So you can buy that Connect for $100, take the sensors out of it, and put them in your robot. Biotech. We can now read, write, engineer, and recode DNA the way we do computer code, because it is computer code, leading to high yield, high nutrition, disease-resistant crops, new treatments for diseases, designer children, new species, perhaps extreme life extension, perhaps understanding how the brain works, DNA computers. We can 3D print human organs. Below is a bladder. We can work with single atoms in atomically precise graphene. We can make custom designer atoms by squeezing electrons into a confined space. They jump to other energy levels that do not occur naturally in an atom, and then you get totally new materials. New ways of fabricating, generative genomics, it's rule-based. So if you wanted to make an oak tree, you would not nail sticks to a pole and then glue leaves to the sticks. What you do is you put a bunch of rules, otherwise known as the DNA in an acorn, in the ground and let the oak tree make itself. We may eventually be making our cell phones that way. Here's one of my colleagues at Pratt, Carl Shu, gives his students 3 genes at the beginning of the semester, and by the end of the semester, the building has grown itself. So what will all of this bring? It'll bring a digital industrial revolution, an Internet of Things. So the things that we saw that happen with information, the things that we saw that happen with the internet can start to happen to things once they're digitized. Then open source collaboration, these 3D printers, you hook it up to your computer, you have a design in your computer for, maybe it's a toy for a dollhouse, and it'll 3D print that toy. Where do you get that design? People are making their hundreds of thousands of these designs, and people put them online where you can download them for free to then make. And this will then subject this kind of fabrication to exponential growth. And then maybe we can even find our car keys through search. So if I'm right about all this, or this is really happening, why is there pessimism in the face of all this positive evidence? Series of explanations for that, I believe. One is a fear of environmental degradation. That's a real issue, and we got to fix it. Top right is a BMW in Germany being disassembled in Germany. Every part in a car has a code, and they don't just get crushed, but they're disassembled, and each part goes in the appropriate bin according to its code. We already recycle a third of all of our aluminum. No reason we shouldn't get that to 90 or 100%. We certainly don't throw away any gold. We recycle all that, and quite a bit of our silver. Here's a book by Bill McDonough, Cradle to Cradle, which thinks about how we can totally redo our economy so there isn't any waste. Another cause of pessimism is fear of resource depletion. Peak oil. 2 years ago, all you heard was peak oil, peak oil. No one talks about it anymore. Because suddenly, looks like there's a few hundred years more of oil, and that's not even counting the natural gas. There is no resource problem. And then below we see that solar power is 7 doublings away, 14 years. The amount of installed base of solar power we generate doubles every 2 years, from meeting 100% of the world's energy needs. You have to worry about how you're going to distribute it and all that. But these things are happening. On the left is the cost, just falling off a cliff of generating solar power. Why else is there this pessimism? A struggle to maintain the status quo. New technologies lead to new industries and new groups emerge, and established groups don't like it. Attachment to a linear, logical worldview. People from the literate, linear, analog, private world are confronted by the digital world, and they don't like it. Marshall McLuhan addresses that in Understanding Media. On the right are some of these new digital industries. And so on the left, Kodak, Sears, Westinghouse, New York Times live in a linear world, a red line we see on the graph in the middle. And companies like Instagram, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, PayPal, and YouTube live in an exponential world, a digital exponential world. The ones on the left are in trouble or gone, and the ones on the right are thriving. Another source of pessimism, the digital divide. The rich are going to have these toys and the poor won't have them. It's true that the first Motorola cell phone cost $4,000, but that cost came down very quickly. And so the CEO of Apple has the same cell phone I do. And that phone is $600. That's it's cheaper because you get a contract. But $600 is a lot. But to the right of that is a Kia Ceera, does everything that the iPhone will do for $50. Just the design's not as cool. And if $50 is too much, to the right of that is a flip phone that costs $12. And if you want the camera, you pay $15. And if you know what you're doing, you can do quite a bit with a flip phone. Bloomberg's terminals cost $1,800 a month, but Google, Wolfram, and Bing give us a lot for free. Another source of pessimism are groups of people that just feel they need to be in control. So Virginia Postal in The Future and Its Enemies divides us into dynamists who favor open-ended change, creativity, and exploration, and stasis, who accept progress, but it has to be controlled by planning. And she divides them into reactionaries who fear the unknown, and technocrats who value the future, but only if it conforms to their plans. Problem is, positive developments are often not planned nor even predicted. And so Kenneth Galbraith's The New Industrial State totally attempted to lock us into a planned dead-end world, and Jeremy Rifkin is continually predicting some dire end to our technological world. Entropy, everything's going to burn out, and the sun's going to die in 20 billion years, and we'll run out of solar energy or something like that. Can't believe these people. And we look before at figures like Elon Musk, who's bringing us Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City, and Hyperloop. But most economic theories disparage the entrepreneur. Both Keynesians and the Austrians either see the individual entrepreneur fading away or actively seek its elimination. Another cause of this pessimism is a discomfort with the messiness of life and a calling for a new Neolithic. There's some people who have a visceral abhorrence for the messy, grasping quality of life, particularly human life. And some even advocate that we give up all technologies since the Neolithic. Paul Ehrlich advocates forced sterilization, deindustrialization, tearing down cities, and preventing poor countries from developing. Real pleasant stuff. And the worst, I think, is the prosperity deniers. Never happened. It didn't happen. There is no prosperity. There was a blip. Robert Gordon, an economist at Northwestern University, it was all an accident of history, and we are now thankfully over it, and we can at last return to the new normal. Recently written up in New York Magazine, The Blip. What if everything we've come to think of as American is predicated on a freak coincidence of economic history, and what if that coincidence has run its course? Give me a break. I mean, here is a little diagram, 2 slides from a video that you can go find on YouTube, addresses below, looking at the past 200 years. It was not a blip, from 1945 to 1970. It's been going on for 200 years and a lot longer. So on the lower image shows all the countries of the world. Red is Asia, blue is Sub-Saharan Africa, sort of yellow-green is North and South America. So by being down, they have a short life expectancy. By being to the left, they have a low income. So as you move up, you live longer. As you move to the right, are more affluent. And you can watch each of these as these circles grow as population increases. You can watch this video going from 1800 to 2009 and see them move up and to the right. Everywhere in the world, every country, every region, people live longer and the more affluent. And it's been continuous for 200 years, and there's no reason to think that it's stopping. On the left is life expectancy, 1800, 35 years. Today, globally, 67 years. And even since the mid-70s, which the Great Stagnation people claim, things have been getting worse. Well, since 1970s in the United States, life expectancy has increased 5 years. That's a pretty good measure. I mean, it's better to be alive than dead. Size of the average home has doubled. Percent of people going to college and grad school has doubled. Cost of TVs and video recorders are down 80%. Cost of airfares are down 80%. Information has become essentially free. And in the past 10 years, CO2 output has decreased 13%. And globally, 1 billion people have left abject poverty for modest affluence. So, in conclusion, technologically driven affluence is real. Some new technologies are predictable, but many are not. If we want new technologies and the affluence they bring, we need an open culture that is receptive to them. Now, we might ask the question, what will we do with this affluence? And that is a cultural question, and I hope the humanities, the social sciences, politics, economics, and government are up to the task of answering that question. The affluence, the technology will bring us. The rest is for these other fields. Well, that's what I wanted to say, and you've got, you can go online and get this information. Just where do you get this kind of information? Good source is kurzweileai.net, websites of some organizations where you can get this information. All the figures that I've addressed here, you can listen to their lectures on YouTube. Here are some optimistic books. Here are some pessimistic books. And this lecture, you can find it on YouTube. You can download a PDF of the slides from here. For years, I would end these kinds of lectures for my students with this image on the left. It's a Xerox on a raw egg. And then I would ask, why aren't we Xeroxing our cars? And if we look at the 3D printer on the right, now we are. Thank you.